It was Father's Day weekend, 1969. In the rolling green wilderness of the Great Smoky Mountains, families were out celebrating, children laughing and playing. Among them was 6-year-old Dennis Martin, small, shy, with a gap-toothed smile and a bright red t-shirt that stood out against the dense summer forest. That bright shirt would be the last thing anyone ever saw of him. The Great Smoky Mountains in June of 1969 were a paradise for families seeking escape from the heat and bustle of city life. The ancient peaks, shrouded in their characteristic blue-gray mist, had drawn visitors for generations. The Martin family was no exception to this annual pilgrimage. The Martin family had come to the Smokies as part of a long-standing tradition, a multi-generational camping trip. Dennis, his father William, his grandfather Clyde, and his older brother Doug set up camp in an area known as Spence Field, a high, grassy meadow near the Tennessee-North Carolina border. Spence Field sits at about 4,900 feet elevation, a natural clearing surrounded by dense Appalachian forest. It's the kind of place that feels both welcoming and wild, open enough for children to run and play, yet bordered by wilderness that stretches for hundreds of miles in every direction. The meadow offers sweeping views of the surrounding peaks, but those same mountains that provide such beauty also hide countless ravines, caves, and impenetrable thickets. As the family settled in, they crossed paths with another family, the Key family, also camping in the area. The adults chatted about the weather, the beautiful scenery, and their plans for the weekend. The children, eager to make friends in this remote setting, started playing together. It was pure childhood joy, running, giggling, chasing each other through the meadow, their voices carrying across the open space. Dennis, despite his shy nature, quickly warmed up to the other children. His red shirt made him easy to spot as he darted between the scattered campsites, his laughter mixing with the sounds of the mountain breeze through the surrounding trees. That afternoon, as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, the kids came up with an idea. They'd split into 2 groups and try to surprise the adults by sneaking up on them from different directions. It was the kind of innocent game that children have played for generations, a harmless bit of mischief in a safe, controlled environment. Dennis, being the youngest at just 6 years old, decided to hide behind a nearby bush on the edge of the treeline. His task was simple: wait for his signal, then jump out to startle the adults. His brother Doug and the other boys circled around in the opposite direction, planning their own surprise approach. The plan should have been simple. The children should have emerged from their hiding spots within minutes, bringing laughter and mock surprise to the adults enjoying their peaceful afternoon. But when the other children jumped out to startle the adults, Dennis never did. His father, William, waited. At first, he assumed Dennis was just taking his time, perhaps being extra careful to remain hidden. But as the seconds stretched into minutes, concern began to creep in. Called his name. "Dennis, come on out, son." No answer. The sound of his voice echoed across the meadow and into the treeline, but was met only with silence. The other children looked around confused, wondering why their youngest accomplice hadn't joined in the fun. William walked quickly toward the bush where Dennis had been hiding, his heart beginning to race. He ran to the bush where Dennis had hidden, empty. In that moment, as he stared at the vacant spot where his son should have been, William Martin knew something was wrong. The area wasn't large. His son couldn't have wandered far. Dennis was a shy child, not one to wander off on his own, especially not in unfamiliar territory. But there was no sign of him, no rustle in the undergrowth, no flash of that bright red shirt that should have been visible from a considerable distance in the open meadow. William called out again, louder this time, his voice carrying a note of urgency that hadn't been there moments before. The other families stopped their conversations and began to look around, sensing that something had shifted from playful to serious. Within minutes, what had been a peaceful family gathering transformed into something much more desperate. William was sprinting down the Appalachian Trail, fearing Dennis might have headed that way. The trail, which passes right by Spence Field, stretches for over 2,000 miles from Georgia to Maine, an endless corridor through wilderness where a small child could disappear without a trace. He ran for nearly 2 miles down the rocky path, calling his son's name until his voice was hoarse, before turning back. Other campers spread out across the meadow and into the surrounding forest, calling Dennis's name. Their voices created an eerie chorus that bounced off the mountains and faded into the vast wilderness beyond. As the afternoon wore on and Dennis failed to emerge from any hiding spot or respond to the increasingly frantic calls, the search expanded. Word spread to other campers in the area, and soon dozens of people were combing through the forest, checking every conceivable hiding place a small child might find. By nightfall, the search had escalated. Park rangers, hikers, and volunteers combed the area with flashlights, their beams cutting through the darkness like desperate fingers reaching into the unknown. The temperature in the mountains dropped significantly after dark, and everyone knew that a 6-year-old in just a t-shirt and shorts would be in serious danger if he was lost in the wilderness overnight. The search took on an almost surreal quality in the darkness. Flashlight beams swept back and forth across the landscape, voices called out constantly, and the sound of people crashing through the underbrush echoed through the night. But despite all the activity, despite all the eyes and ears focused on finding one small boy, there was no response, no sign that Dennis Martin was anywhere within reach. By the next morning, word had spread far beyond the campground. The search was massive, drawing resources from across the region. Over the following days, it became one of the largest in national park history. More than 1,400 people involved, including the National Guard and the Green Berets who brought in special tracking units. The operation was unprecedented in its scope. Helicopters circled overhead, their rotors beating a constant rhythm over the forest canopy. Search dogs were brought in from multiple states, their handlers hoping the animals could pick up a scent trail that human searchers had missed. The FBI joined the investigation, bringing with them expertise in child abduction cases. The searchers divided the vast wilderness into grids, systematically covering every square mile of terrain. They rappelled into ravines, searched caves, and pushed through thickets so dense that visibility was limited to just a few feet. The terrain was punishing: steep slopes, loose rocks, and vegetation so thick it could hide a person just yards away. As the massive search operation continued, focusing primarily on the area around Spence Field, a strange report surfaced that would add a deeply unsettling dimension to the mystery. While the search focused on Spence Field, a strange report surfaced. On the same afternoon Dennis vanished, just a few miles away near Rowan's Creek, the Key family, the same family Dennis had played with earlier, claimed they heard a loud, sickening scream. It was the kind of sound, they said, that didn't seem quite right. Not the typical cry of a child at play, but something more distressing, more urgent. Moments later, they saw what they described as a rough-looking man, darting through the woods, trying not to be seen. The figure moved quickly and deliberately, as if trying to avoid detection. He appeared disheveled and out of place in the wilderness setting, and something about his furtive behavior struck the Key family as deeply wrong. This report was never fully reconciled with the official search timeline. Some investigators dismissed it as unrelated, perhaps a hiker who had heard about the missing child and didn't want to be bothered by questions, or simply someone who preferred to avoid contact with others in the wilderness. Others, however, wondered, could Dennis have been abducted? The location of the sighting was significant. Rowan's Creek is several miles from Spence Field, but it's connected by a network of old logging roads and hiking trails. If someone had taken Dennis, it would have been possible to move him to that area relatively quickly, especially if they were familiar with the terrain. Adding to the mystery, experienced trackers from the Green Berets reportedly found signs in the woods, footprints that could have belonged to a small child, heading into rough, remote terrain. These weren't the clear, obvious tracks that might be found on a well-maintained trail, but subtle signs in the leaf litter and soft earth that only the most experienced woodsman would notice. The tracks seemed to lead away from Spence Field into increasingly difficult terrain, areas where a 6-year-old would have extreme difficulty traveling on his own. But these findings were never officially confirmed in public reports, leaving investigators and the family with tantalizing hints of Dennis's path, but no concrete answers. Some searchers reported finding what appeared to be fabric snagged on branches, but none of it could be definitively linked to Dennis's clothing. Others claimed to have found small footprints in creek beds, but these too proved impossible to verify as belonging to the missing boy. As the days passed without any trace of Dennis, investigators and experts began to develop theories about what might have happened in those crucial moments when he disappeared. The terrain around Spence Field is unforgiving. Steep ravines, thick underbrush, sudden drop-offs that could easily trap or injure a small child. The area is honeycombed with natural caves and rock formations that could conceal a person indefinitely. Black bears roam the area, and while attacks on humans are rare, a frightened or territorial bear could pose a serious threat to a small child. Dense fog can descend without warning in the mountains, reducing visibility to just a few feet and disorienting even experienced hikers. Weather in the high elevation areas can change rapidly, with temperatures dropping unexpectedly and storms appearing suddenly. One theory is that Dennis wandered deeper into the woods, became disoriented, and succumbed to exposure. In this scenario, he might have followed animal trails or stream beds deeper into the wilderness, moving farther from the search area with each passing hour. The mountains are vast enough that someone could walk for days without encountering another human being. Another theory, the one that still haunts many, is that someone took him. The sighting by the Key family, the unexplained scream, and the tracks leading into remote areas all support the possibility that Dennis's disappearance was not accidental. In 1969, awareness of child abduction was not as heightened as it is today, and it's possible that a predator could have been operating in the area without detection. There's also the possibility of a tragic accident, that Dennis fell into a ravine or became trapped in a cave, and his body was simply never found despite the massive search effort. The wilderness areas around the Great Smoky Mountains contain countless places where someone could disappear without a trace. But here's the chilling fact that haunts investigators to this day. In all the days of searching, despite the involvement of over 1,400 people, despite helicopters, search dogs, and the most advanced tracking techniques available in 1969, no piece of clothing, no personal item, not even a shoe from that bright red outfit was ever found. This absence of physical evidence is perhaps the most puzzling aspect of the case. Even if Dennis had wandered deep into the wilderness and died of exposure, searchers should have found something. A piece of fabric caught on a branch, a shoe lost while crossing a stream, some trace that would indicate which direction he had traveled. By mid-June, after more than a week of intensive searching, the official search wound down. The decision was heartbreaking but practical. The resources that had been devoted to finding Dennis were enormous, and with no new leads or evidence, authorities had to acknowledge that the immediate search effort had reached its limits. The Martin family, devastated but not ready to give up, continued to return to the Smokies for years, holding on to hope that somehow, somewhere, they might find answers. William Martin never stopped believing that his son might still be alive, that perhaps Dennis had been taken by someone and could still be found. Every year, on the anniversary of Dennis's disappearance, the family would make the pilgrimage back to Spence Field. They would walk the trails, post flyers, and talk to anyone who would listen, hoping that someone might have seen something, might remember a detail that could break the case open. The case remained officially active, with park rangers and local law enforcement continuing to investigate any new leads that emerged. Over the years, there were occasional reports of sightings, people who claimed to have seen a child matching Dennis's description in various locations. But none of these leads ever produced concrete results. But Dennis Martin was never found. His disappearance remains one of the most enduring mysteries in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, a case that has puzzled investigators, researchers, and amateur sleuths for more than 5 decades. The story of Dennis Martin has become part of the folklore of the Great Smoky Mountains, whispered around campfires and discussed on hiking forums. It serves as a stark reminder of how quickly the wilderness can swallow up a human being, how the same natural beauty that draws millions of visitors to the mountains each year can also hide secrets that may never be revealed. Today, hikers pass through Spence Field unaware that the ground they walk on once swarmed with searchers, that somewhere in the nearby wilderness, a secret may still be hidden. The meadow looks much the same as it did in 1969, peaceful, beautiful, surrounded by the endless green expanse of the mountains. 55 years later, the forest is still silent about what happened to Dennis Martin. If he vanished into nature's grasp or was taken by something far more human, no one knows. And maybe no one ever will.